Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. First day back from our little break, little recharge the batteries, spend time with the families, step back and rejuvenate. And, the time we were off, I got to be honest, I kind of dropped out. I'm not sure what's going on. But an interesting day to come back with all the craziness that we're about to enter into, and the weekend that we just had. Quite an interesting time to jump back in with both feet. And it's one of these times where, during the time off, thinking about the new year, thinking about what's possible, thinking about what direction we want to go, what we want to focus the program. Maybe making some New Year's resolutions. And what's interesting is a huge number of people actually bother doing this every year. According to the group Finder.com, they have a survey out that says almost 189 million of us will make New Year's resolutions. And what I find interesting is when you bore down into their numbers, the younger you are, the more likely you are to bother with a whole New Year's resolution. 92% of Generation Z. They're going to make one. The millennials, 89%, Gen X, 79%, the boomers down to 61%, and, the boomers' parents, the silent generation, 47%. And I got to be honest, we're an optimistic country. I mean, when you look at the numbers, what they've extrapolated out of here, out of 100, we've got 141 million people who think that this time they're going to do it right. So you got 189 million people say we're going to try, and almost 142 million say this time we're going to succeed. That gives me hope, because maybe once we get past the day after tomorrow, once it's finally official, it is certified, there's no path for Trump. Now understand, there is still no path for Trump to win. There is no way that Trump will be president after January 20th. That is not going to happen, short of a military coup. And that's not going to happen. But there's part of me that goes, I'm so optimistic that maybe we can save what's left of this tanking republic. Maybe there's an opportunity that we can read. And I know, Rick, you're so naive. You're so glass half full, which anybody who knows me knows that is so not me. But I still want to believe that there's an opportunity to reach out to people who may have been, marginally Trump supporters and bring them to sanity, especially after the last perfect phone call. Mr. Art of the Lie with another perfect phone call. Remember the Zelensky call? Completely perfect. And I would argue it was perfect. If you're a mob boss trying to swindle somebody out of something, trying to twist their arm, it was a perfect call if that's the world that you're putting in. This much like the same thing. And, while I was off, I had a lot of conversations with Trump supporters who still believe there's a path forward. They still believe that, Donald Trump is gonna snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat, and he's gonna do it because he's Donald Trump. And it got me in this weird kind of space, because look, every state has already certified their electors. Every attorney general has gone through and said, yep, this is the count. Every secretary of state has stamped it. It's done. It's all over except the singing at the end. But there's still Trump who believes, and if you listen to this more than an hour-long blathering, he truly believes it. And I guess the poetic justice, if there is any in this moment, is that he truly believes there is no way possible that he could win. So for the rest of his life on this planet, it is going to be rotating in his brain, banging around between his ears, that he was cheated. There's no way. And he's going to be completely losing his mind. And I find it interesting that, he truly believes, and so do his supporters. And now look, I said this back before we went on break. Are there problems with our election system? Sure, there are some problems. And what's happened is how we frame ourselves into these polar opposite equations, where the left is on one side saying there's no way there are any irregularities. There was a perfect election because our guy won. And on the other side, you got the Trump people going, no, they all cheated. Trump himself said he won Georgia by 500,000 votes, which you go explain that. In his mind, he won by 500,000 votes, and his supporters believe it, and that there's no way possible he could even come close to losing, and that everything was fraudulent. And I find myself somewhere between the middle. Trump lost. Were there irregularities? Sure. There always are. Did a dead person vote? Probably. Especially if they did a mail-in ballot. They mailed it in, and then they died, and there it is. Were there people going around to graveyards, filling names out? Maybe. But did they get counted? Most likely not. Because, and this is where the whole understanding how the system works actually works. Those mail-in ballots, when they come in, they do check them against a list to make sure you're alive. It's not just something that they go, oh, no, here, you mailed it in. Oh, it's just, never mind. So it's kind of an amusing kind of moment if it weren't so deadly. And the scary thing to me is we're in this moment where anything having to do with our politics is now in the perspective of who you voted for. And I've always said, I believe that, no matter who you vote for, to me is a window into your soul. It tells me where your values are. And what we've noticed from our Republican friends, at least the most loud and boisterous ones, the Proud Boys who are, basically going to tear our state, our Capitol apart over the next couple of days. In fact, their leader just arrested for property damage. And I know, good God-fearing Christian white folk. But this is one of those moments where we're in scary times, and we have someone in a position of power who is making it worse. Now, I brought up the Zelensky call. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and is what got him impeached, as it should have. I look at this conversation with this Brad Raffensperger. Also, nowhere close to perfect. But the right sees it as perfectly okay because, well, he's just a businessman making a business deal. He's not a businessman. I'm sorry. He's president of the United States. This is not how our politics operate. And I know there's some who want that. They want this to be a fascist country. They want this to be the kind of a place where we have a strong man in the White House who is going to twist arms and who is going to do whatever it takes for him to win. This is one of those moments where democracy, good governance, the future of the country has nothing to do with what they want. They want their guy to win and win by any cost. I was having a conversation with somebody. I go, what we're seeing is what happens when you let 5-year-olds throw temper tantrums after losing a baseball game, which is why I've never been one of those people who says we don't keep score. We have to teach people how to lose graciously and then work hard to do better next time, to understand that life lessons are in those little losses. We have a president who's never lost. He's always figured out how to blame someone else. He's always figured out how to make sure that someone else felt the consequences and the repercussions, not him. And this is that moment where if you listen to this call, and I did for the entire time, I listened to a man who clearly is struggling with some mental issues. Said 71 times. I counted. And is acting in his narrow self-interest and not ours. And, as I was listening to the call, immediately he goes, well, I couldn't have possibly lost. My rallies were bigger. And you go, what are you talking about? But my rallies were bigger. Yeah, because the other side didn't have any. They didn't encourage people to go into stadiums and be shoulder to shoulder and breathe on each other during a global pandemic. They're smarter than that. But what I found interesting is during the call with this Raffensperger is he goes through and he ticks off this laundry list. And they've drilled it down. Like there were 4,502 people who voted who weren't on the voter registration list. I don't know that to be true because they haven't put that under oath in a court of law. He goes and he says 18,325 people voted, had vacant addresses. They lived nowhere. Again, not in the court of law. What they've done out for these calls. 904 people only had P.O. boxes. Probably because those 904 people, if that's true, are probably homeless. And he goes into absentee ballots, people sent, to vacant houses, and he goes into, people who didn't have addresses on them a couple of times. He said over 5,000 dead people voted. He said that all these people moved from other states. It was all kinds of stuff. And on the dead person front, he didn't just stop with Georgia. Evidently, 18,000 dead people in Michigan got up and voted. Now, again, as I said a moment ago, states have a cross-check system to make sure that you're not dead. This is one of those things that they've thought of. This is how governance works. Understand, they thought of this one. What's interesting to me and what I'm going to find really curious is if Raffensperger starts locking up Republicans for doing all of the things that Trump claims the Democrats did in the election on Tuesday. It's going to be interesting to see, out of some weird sense of fairness or, vindication or however you want to put it. It's going to be interesting to see. And, I'm not going to bore you with all the details of the call, but he claimed he won by 500,000 votes. Said, there was cheating like no one's ever cheated before. Boxes were stuffed like they've never been stuffed before. Like a ranting old guy who hasn't left the Barcalounger in years. It was really, while comical, scary, because this is the guy who is the most powerful man in the world at this moment. Now look, did he break the law? I believe he did. I believe going after the person in charge of the elections in a state and telling them we need to find almost 11,700 votes. We need to find 11,780 votes. We need to find them. He said, quote, the people of Georgia are angry. People around the country are angry. He said, and there's nothing wrong with saying, you've recalculated. That means you just pulled something out of your backside. He said, so what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. It's crazy. While attempting to intimidate this Raffensperger guy, going on this rant about how there's no way he lost and he won by hundreds of thousands of votes and how people aren't going to like him anymore. I mean, it was really just crazy, the places that he went. Now, understand, Raffensperger is now being touted as this guy he's heroic. He's doing his job. For heaven forbid, a Republican actually does his job. He is. He's doing the minimum he can do. When you come out with wild claims of just this craziness, they have to go, I'm sorry, this is wrong. Because Raffensperger did everything he could possibly do before the election to make sure this election was stolen. And if you're this guy, in your mind, you've got to be thinking, what the hell did I do all that stuff for? I threw, hundreds of thousands of people off the voting rolls so that they couldn't vote and have their votes counted. And this is the treatment I get? Now, for me, there was one moment in the entire hour-plus rambling and berating that went on. And it's when Raffensperger goes to Trump that he says, Mr. President, the challenge you have is the data you have is wrong. And that's the hero moment. But he goes on to say that, we've talked to the congressman and we were surprised. But I guess, he said, there was a person named Mr. Barnyard who came to these meetings and presented data, and he said that there were dead people, I believe upwards of 5,000. The actual number was two. He goes, two people that voted. So that's wrong. And for me, it was the moment where you go, none of these wild claims that Trump has made, and I've been saying this all along, straight from the beginning, none of these claims have been uttered in a court of law. None of them. So this is Raffensperger going, I can only do what I can take into court, and you're giving me nothing. Now, did Trump commit a crime? Possibly. He's not going to be held accountable for it. Trust me, that's not going to happen. I know there are people who say we should censor him, and there's a number of Democrats who are pushing for that. And there are some who say, no, we should be impeaching them. Well, that's not going to happen either. It's us. Every Republican voter, especially if you're in Georgia right now, there's a way you can stop this insanity. And that's you go out and vote. And you throw the Loefflers and the Perdues out the door into the streets, and we put people in who are going to help us move forward and get to the bottom of all this stuff. It's something that we have to do. And like I said, one of the things I'm going to be watching for on Wednesday and beyond is how many Republicans get arrested because they think they're entitled to cheat. They're entitled to come from another state and vote. They're entitled to do whatever crimes they believe that they have somehow been aggrieved with. It's going to be interesting for me. Be it out of, hey, we're gonna stand up for our party and cheat like they did, or some weird sense of fairness or some weird sense of vindication, whatever. I'm gonna be interested to see how this plays out. And also, how many Republicans stand up and speak out in this moment of insanity? We're going to find out. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day workers at UAW Local 14 walked out on strike against the Toledo Chevrolet transmission plant. They joined the strike wave against General Motors. The national campaign started in November in Atlanta, Georgia, followed by auto strikes in Kansas City and Cleveland, then intensified in late December with the Great Flint Sit-Down Strike. Local 14 members had experienced General Motors' tricks firsthand during a 1935 strike. When GM couldn't stop unionization efforts at the Toledo plant, they began moving the machinery to non-union facilities in nearby Saginaw, Michigan, and Muncie, Indiana. GM's maneuvers drove Local 14 leaders to fight for a national agreement and help with organizing the national strike wave. Once it began, they were able to effectively shut down their plant. They routinely traveled to Flint during the sit-down to help with strike support and soup kitchen efforts. Many Local 14 members would also help beat back the police assault on sit-down strikers in the coming Battle of Running Bulls at Flint. And as Local 14 members walked out on strike at the Chevy plant that day, the UAW presented its 8 demands to GM. These included national collective bargaining rights, the end to the piecemeal pay system, the 30-hour work week, 6-hour day, time and a half for overtime, a living wage, reinstatement of discharged workers, the establishment of seniority rights, the recognition of the UAW as sole bargaining agent, and shared determination of production speed at all plants. GM finally started to budge a month later. This historic agreement would be signed in late March and set the standard in industries across the country as millions of workers sought to unionize. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Operation Warp Speed, not up to speed. And you look at the stories from around the country of the places that have the vaccine, but we're struggling to get them into people. The number of folks who are, because we're in this weird moment, refusing to do it. The numbers I saw coming out of Ohio were really frightening. Where I forget what the number was, like 40-50% of the hospital people were saying, no, we're gonna wait. I mean, the numbers are frightening. But the sad reality is this is another botched moment. We may get this stuff out, but it's not getting into people and not fast enough. I was hoping we'd be well beyond, 4.2 million doses they've given out, something like that. Some really crazily low number. It's just sad stuff. But here to share some thoughts on, how did we get here? He's got a new column out that I think is fantastic. Blame this president for why you haven't gotten your vaccine yet, and it is Ronald Reagan. We've got our good friend Will Bunchback, national columnist for the Philly Daily News. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Why do we blame Ronald Reagan for not getting the vaccine? Why poor Ronnie?
Well, first of all, it's our general policy to blame Ronald Reagan for everything, right? So that's number one. But seriously, the big problem here is, so the Trump administration, the federal government, they kept talking for months and months about this Operation Warp Speed, and the only thing that was mildly successful about Operation Warp Speed is they did speed up the production of doses of the vaccine, right? So that when the vaccine was approved, they had a decent number of doses that were ready to go. So that was good, right? But the thing is, their plan, they really did not have a good distribution plan, and what quote plan unquote that they did have basically involved dumping everything onto the states. And the thing is, and what most people haven't been following here and don't know understandably is that, for the last 40 years, really going back to the start of the Reagan era, we have just decimated public health in this country. Public health budget, is a percentage of what we spend have constantly been falling. We've really fallen behind other developed countries in just our investment in public health. It's not a priority. We live in a world where not only Republicans, but to be honest, too many Democrats, of the Bill Clinton stripe have endorsed this, government is the problem. Let's shrink government to the size of the bathtub, and public health is where rubber hits the road. So these vaccines are going to state departments that have been just beleaguered in the last year trying to keep up with the coronavirus, trying to keep up with running testing sites and trying to do contact tracing, although, as you know, we've done a terrible job of contact tracing in this country. But, state health departments have been trying to keep up with all these things while being short-staffed and underfunded and undermanned. And now the vaccines are here and there's no plan. So, as you said, I think the latest number I've seen now is 4.5 million people have been vaccinated, but about 14 or 15 million doses have been delivered. So we seem to be keeping at this rate where 2 out of 3 doses that are getting delivered to these states aren't being jabbed, as they like to say in Britain, into our citizens. And it's really just an unconscionable failure. And if Joe Biden wants to get off to an FDR style start in his first 100 days, the best thing he can do is figure out a way to get these doses into the arms of people who need them. He really should.
Yeah, and to highlight your point, you think about the fact that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans have refused at every level to give any money to the states to help them deal with this kind of stuff. And
I mean, right. I mean, you're right. I mean, that's the first coronavirus relief package that passed contained just an incredibly underwhelming amount of money for vaccine distribution. Now the bill that was just finally belatedly signed into law by President Trump over Christmas does contain new money, and it's going to help. But we needed that money months ago, not now. So it's really going to be a struggle to keep up, unfortunately.
I mean, especially in this moment where, I know our news media isn't covering it, but we're getting, record high numbers of cases. Deaths are still way up. And it's going to be bad for another couple of months until we get people vaccinated, until we get to the other side of this.
Yeah, I mean, what a fraught time. I mean, if you can just imagine, either you personally or a loved one or a family member coming down, contracting the coronavirus at this time where, like you said, I mean, infections and hospitalizations and deaths are all at record highs right now. And yet we have a vaccine, that can immunize people. And, these couple months now where the virus is still spreading like wildfire and the vaccines are there, but they're not getting to people. I mean, that's just agony. I mean, I can't imagine if anybody in my family or my circle becomes ill while we're sitting here waiting for the vaccine. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to even think about that possibility.
No, but the point of your article, and I think is extremely well written and well taken, is that look, the Republicans have been saying, and some, as you pointed out aptly, some Democrats, that the sad reality is they have run on government doesn't work, and when they get in power, they prove that government can't work. This is the ultimate in proving their narrative by botching this and butchering this so badly that they can now say, look, see, government doesn't work. We need private interest to do this.
Yeah, and I mean, in the case of the coronavirus, the pharmaceutical industry, which is one of the most obscenely profitable businesses known to humankind, they developed the vaccine on a faster pace than anyone expected, and they should get some credit for that. I mean, at least they've done something with all these profits they've made over the years. But when these vaccines that were developed by private companies get passed over to government for their part of the job, which is distributing it to people, they're clueless. They don't know what to do. I mean, I've been seeing new information just tonight before I went on the show about the situation in Florida, which is just really ridiculous. The work's been dumped onto these counties that don't really have the infrastructure to handle this, and they're sending up these Eventbrite online sign-up things, which, for one thing, like scammers are coming along and are scamming senior citizens on fake sign-up sites, which is pretty unconscionable. And you've seen these situations in Florida where hundreds of senior citizens, some of them with walkers, and it actually gets pretty cold at night in Florida in January, and these people are out on lines overnight waiting to get vaccinated. And again, it's one of these things, how does this happen in supposedly one of the richest countries in the world? It's just hard to believe.
Well, it's crazy. And if you go back and you remember, I mean, one of Trump's arguments was he was going to use the military to come out and give that hand, bring in military medical personnel to set up temps. I mean, that's a better thing than just going, hey, you take care of it. We're going to dump it on you, even though we've given you no resources and no ability to do it. Tough on you.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to have the world's most overfunded military, which we do in this country, this would actually be one of those times where they could be put to use, in a peaceful, positive, contributing way. And I don't know. Do you understand what even happened? I mean, why did they why did they tell us for months that the military was going to help in this operation when the time is here and the military is nowhere to be seen? I mean, I don't know if they're like too busy, making plans to attack Iraq or do the Insurrection Act thing in the last 2 weeks of Trump's presidency, but they seem to be nowhere to be found.
I mean, it's one of those things that I've been asking, why is it that it's been dumped on to the local health centers and the local doctor's office they don't have the infrastructure to begin with? Because as you pointed out, we haven't invested in health. So do you think this becomes one of these rallying cry moments where people are, see in front of us what 40 years of supply side voodoo Reaganomics has brought us, and then they demand change? Or does this go the other way where, see, government doesn't work, we need to destroy the whole animal? How do you see it playing out?
That's a great question. And I think, again, as I kind of mentioned a minute ago, I think a lot of it depends on Biden. And I'm getting good vibes. I'm seeing good things about how the Biden team seems to understand just how important this is, and how, I think people's early impressions of what kind of president Joe Biden is going to be, I think are really going to be centered a lot on this one issue. Can he take over the coronavirus distribution and make it work in a way that Trump didn't? And, I know you're a student of history like I am, and this is really such an FDR type moment, right? These first 100 days for Biden, if he can show that government can make a difference, just like FDR did with the New Deal and his first 100-day programs in the Great Depression. That really ushered in a 30 to 40 year run where Americans, had faith that there was a powerful role for government, and it ushered in this period where you saw things like the GI Bill, and I'm working on a book right now about kind of the history of college in modern America and how that's affected our politics, and the GI Bill is a huge example of when people had faith that government could do something positive, and it did, and it really boosted so many people into this middle-class lifestyle.
No, you're right. And, what I've been saying for the longest time is that Democrats have to go back to this ideology of we need to make people's lives better. What is it that you're going to do that's going to make people's lives better? Republicans have shown us that they don't have those policies, and that's not even in their interest, judging from how long it's taken to get survival checks into people's pockets during a pandemic. I mean, the fact that McConnell was going to hold this hostage for all these months, to me, again, speaks volumes. But, as I've been saying, we need to go back to that idea that government can help in making people's lives better. It just seems that simple to me.
Yeah, it's really just kind of a simple philosophical question, right? Is government something that is the enemy of the people, as Ronald Reagan said, which kind of makes no sense, or is government the people? If you have a real working democracy, then the people that we elect as our representatives are us, basically, and they're working for us, and they're doing our business. And, I think, in my column, I talked about Reagan's famous joke, that the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." Well, right now there's like millions of people waiting to get this vaccine. And the first thing they want to hear somebody say is, "I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. I'm here to give you this vaccine." I think a successful effort on this, and beating back the coronavirus in 2021, really could be that game changer, that you and I are both looking for, in terms of getting people to see that there is a role for government. Not bad government, not corrupt government, not an overreaching government. Nobody wants that. But people do want a government that works. I really believe that.
Yeah, I always said I don't care large, small, medium. I don't care. I want functional. I want in the middle of the pandemic a government that's going to get us the vaccine. I want them to help in an hour of need. I want to go back to the ideas that we used to believe in this country, that we could do great big things. I mean, I was thinking about it. In my lifetime, we put a man on the moon, and it was the beginning of my life. I was a baby when it happened, but that was the last time where you go, we really did something monumental as a nation to be proud of, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that whole post World War II era, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, people have this faith in science, in technology, and that, in progress, right? And we've managed to just, screw that all up. We've lost that faith, and right now it's hurting us in so many different ways. It's not just hurting us on the coronavirus, although it is absolutely. And you made a reference about, even health workers refusing to take the vaccine. I mean, again, that's just kind of anti-science ignorance. But we're going to need people to have faith in science if we're going to beat back climate change, also, and some of the other problems we face. So it's bigger than just faith in government. It's also, faith in science. It's basically faith in, knowledge and competence and taking care of things.
Yeah, but that's going to be a monumental shift for a lot in our society, as half the country, still thinks, I'm not going to say that many, but a good number of people in our country still thinks Donald Trump won. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people have reached out and say, oh, you're wrong, Trump won. He lost by every stretch of the imagination, by every metric he lost, but yet he's still in his perfect phone call claiming he won.
Yeah, well, we live in such cloistered communities that, Central and Western PA better than even I do. There are these communities out there where you can, drive your car for 15 minutes and not find a Biden voter, and people live in communities like that. And so you say, well, I don't know a single person who voted for Biden. Trump must have won. Well, they don't know places like Delaware County, Pennsylvania, where I live, or Philadelphia, where very few people voted for Trump. But we live in such isolated, separated communities that it's hard to believe that somebody whose values are different than your community's values won an election. And it's just going to take generations of work to bring us back together so that we're not in that situation anymore.
Yeah, we most certainly have an awful lot of work to do. The article, again, blame this president for why you haven't gotten your vaccine yet. Ronald Reagan, written by our good friend Will Bunch, national columnist for the Philly Daily News. We'll get links out. Will, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much, brother.
Yeah, Rick, it was great talking to you again. Thanks for having me on.
Good stuff. As always, our good friend Will Bunch. We'll make sure we get that article out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day that 8,000 social workers went on strike in New York City. For 28 days that bitter, cold January, these workers marched on the picket lines. They were members of the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, District Council 37, and the Social Service Employees Union. In walking off the job, these working people defied a New York law that forbade public sector workers from going on strike. 10 of the city's 25 welfare offices were completely shut down by the strike. One of the main issues of the action was the massive caseload each worker was expected to carry. Some of the workers who helped organize the action brought their experiences from the civil rights movement, and specifically in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Congress of Racial Equality. They were fighting not only for better working conditions, but also better services for their clients. One rallying call for the strike became rehabilitation, not humiliation. Welfare rights and civil rights activists supported the work action. Quickly, the city moved to get an injunction against these working people who were standing up for better conditions. Mayor Robert Wagner fired all of the striking workers. workers. 19 strike leaders were thrown in jail for 2 weeks. With mounting pressure coming from labor and civil rights leaders, the city agreed to appoint a 5-person panel to settle the dispute. The resulting contract made considerable gains for the social workers. Caseloads were capped at 60 clients. They also won improvements in pay, health insurance, vacation, and sick time. The strike is seen as an important victory by public sector workers, not only gaining a better workplace, but also improving service to the public. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I am so excited. So excited to find out that Facebook is in the process of building a company town. Yes, company towns are going to come back. Where the benevolent, the wealthy, the future robber barons, the Zuckerbergs, where they create their little perfect ideological towns, where people all are homogeneously put into place in their place. You're dedicated to company housing. We're going to bring back company stores, company doctors, company education. We're going to be, again, company towns. This is where we're moving back to. History is going back to and repeating itself. We're going to relive the 1880s because we're already in this moment of the Jay Gould idea of I can pay half the working class to murder the other half. We're already in that Hunger Games kind of world. So is it surprising that Facebook is now going to make their big, ideological, hometown? Now, understand, part of it is they want to make sure that their employees live close by the workplace so that they don't have to stray far, not too much of a commute. They're gonna take care of everything, transportation and shopping. They're gonna build this massive complex, this massive 56-acre complex of Facebook World, where there'll be some 1,500 resident units. There's going to be shopping. There's going to be all kinds of things. It's going to be utopia. It's going to be corporate utopia. I would guess until much like the last time we had corporate utopia and the last time we had company towns, you lose your job and they throw you out into the streets. Never mind that. And understand, these aren't the desperate. These aren't going to be the coal miners of the 1880s. These aren't going to be the steel workers. These aren't going to be the chocolate workers from Hershey back in the 30s. It's not going to be any of that. These are smarter people than that. They're not going to get stuck with company script. They're not going to have to see the company doctor. Or will they? And are there some who want to return to those days? I've actually met people who they had grandparents who lived under Milton Hershey's rule when Hershey was a company town. When everything was dictated by, the benevolent dictator. And we're in this weird moment, I think, in this country where democracy so much isn't in our soul. It's not in our DNA anymore. I used to believe that, we wanted the kind of liberty and freedom and the kind of things that the right, loves to throw out as their platitude without really understanding what it means. I used to think that was who we are. But, when you start seeing these kind of signs, and look, Domino's has done it, and a number of other places, have their perfect ideological towns where they only let their kind in. This is us redividing ourselves. It's scary. And the fact that I had to find this on some bizarre blog and then had to go and look, find out more of where it is, because it's a couple years old. But it's moving forward. So this giant company town is part of what's coming. And it got me thinking about the future in this moment of division, where half the country wants government of, for, and by the people, and half of the country wants Donald Trump to be their dictator. The benevolent, company town. It's kind of freaky. Now, like I said, the original story about Facebook's company town is a couple years old, and they've moved forward on their dreamland. But it got me thinking that, wow, is this that moment? And as somebody who has read a bunch of labor's history and spent a lot of time reading about the horrible era for working people that the Gilded Age was, are we moving back to that? Now, I've spent a lot of time here these last couple of weeks talking with union people about how do we re-engage a workforce that has been trained like Pavlovian dogs to, anytime they hear the word union, to just kind of, clam up, foam at the mouth, whatever, and turn away in fear and anger. How do you change that messaging? Because if you go back through the history of this country, the moment in our history when average, everyday working people had the best opportunities was during that period when unions were strong. Back during that period of the 50s and 60s, where 35% of the workforce was unionized. And that was private sector. That's when we had the most prosperous working class. The most prosperous working class in the history of civilization, where people had hope for the future, where they believed in technology, where they wanted their kids to go further and be smarter and do better. We've kind of gotten into this weird moment where everything is now a hunger game. Everything is now, how do we pit each other against the other side? How do we divide and conquer? How do we get ours and the hell with them? I mean, and what we're seeing coming out of Trump, and look, the phone call is a perfect example. He feels 100% entitled to that office. He believes that there's no way possible he could have lost. And the reality is, it is. And I got to be honest, I listened to the call with Rasmus Parker, and I can't imagine being him. He was a loyal foot soldier for the Republican Party. He did everything they wanted him to do. He did all of the things that they asked to cut off voters, to pursue cross-check. He did everything that they could ask of him. And then to have him have to sit through this call where they're basically threatening him is quite amazing. And what's really frightening to me is that this idea that government is bad, government is horrible, government's the problem, as Will Bunch pointed out. The 9 worst words are, I'm the government, I'm here to help. So short-sighted. That's saying that if there's not a profit motive in it, it doesn't get done half the time. The fact that we haven't gotten these vaccines into people's arms as fast as possible for the people who want it. Look, if you don't want it, I step aside. Let people who want to protect themselves do that. It's frightening to me. Now, as I said, I'm not a supporter of big government, I'm not a supporter of small government. I want effective government. I want the potholes filled. I want things to work. I want our tax dollars spent judiciously. I want investments in the future. I want, sound, sane, rational policy. I don't want massive handouts to the very wealthy that end up giving us no return as a society. It doesn't help us. It doesn't make us any better off. It doesn't make the country any better whatsoever. And in fact, there was just, we've been talking about this for a while. Our top 1% has, they have done wildly well during this pandemic. And globally, they have done wildly well. The 500 richest people in the world added almost $2 trillion in wealth. The top 500 people now control $7.6 trillion. That is a 31% increase. Let that sink in for a minute. A 31% increase during a moment when there are going to be millions of people losing their homes, when millions of people have lost their health insurance, they've lost their jobs, they've gone through their savings. And we're told we need to give them more because somehow it will trickle down to the rest of us. That's the ideology of Ronald Reagan. That is what he has brought us. That somehow if we give them enough, that eventually they will turn around and they will give it back to us. Now, there has been a case. Mackenzie Scott, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, has given away a couple of $1 million. A couple $1 billion. Good on her. I had a listener who attacked me for my position because evidently during our break, one of the best ofs that we played talked about, charity and my aversion to charitable causes and the need for charity. I've said from the beginning, I think that through our government, we can solve our nation's problems. If we wanted to end hunger, if we wanted to end homelessness, if we wanted to end poverty, we can do that. We just have to have the political will. And that all of these charitable philanthropic organizations, which look, they all have wonderful missions. They all have great ideas on how to help in little bits and pieces. But we're picking winners and losers. And I wasn't attacking Mackenzie Scott. Good on her for she doesn't have to give the money away. Good on her for doing it. But I attacked the system that creates an environment of the haves, the really haves, and then everyone else, where you have a massive desperation of class that needs charity, that needs handouts, and needs to be one of the ones who are chosen to be winners. When their benevolence doesn't go far enough or wide enough to help. A couple people it does, and that's great. It's fabulous. But it's through our government that we do those things that we personally cannot do. And I simply said that, when we had a tax system in place where that money was used in a much more efficient, much better way through programs that help people where they need it, I think that's a much better way of going about it. There's too much waste, fraud, and abuse in the charitable organization system, too much. And we need to use that better. So I was attacked for it, and I still stand by it. Because I don't believe that we should have to depend on the benevolency of others to do what's right. I don't think we should have to depend on the wealthy on a whim to help people when we should be doing what's right. It's just one of those kind of thought processes I've had. And I guess, and I didn't go into this with the person who had gone after me, as someone who in my lifetime has been on the receiving end of some bit of charity. When I was a kid, I grew up in a housing project, and we got things, not overly useful, but there was an attempt, and I wholly appreciate those attempts. But it would have been better if we spent those resources in a better way, like on a jobs program. For me, the idea of good governance, the idea of how government can help make people's lives better, is create a jobs program. Put people to work doing the things that aren't being done. There are so many things in our country that needs to be addressed that aren't, because it's not profitable. I don't know, teaching people how to give people shots. I can do it. I was 10 years old, and I learned how to give my grandmother a shot with my great-grandmother a shot with her insulin. I learned that as a kid, 10 years old. We can teach people to give the vaccine shots. We can do that. We can teach an army of them. But we don't have the ability to do that. because we haven't had the organization. Because we've had 40 plus years of attack on our government, on attempting to, as Grover Norquist famously said, make it so small that we can drag it in the bathtub and drown it. And the question that I've come back with is this the kind of country we want to live in? Where constantly our government lets us down and fails us because we put people in charge of it who don't believe in it and only use it for self-serving means, like the last 4 years. If the one thing that you can take from the last 4 years, one thing is that Donald Trump served himself. He served his interests over ours at almost every step of the way. But history will judge that. We're in one of these moments, and I'm not sure where it's going to end. Because as we speak, there are people in our nation's capital who are ready to burn the house down. There are representatives, there are senators who know that there wasn't any of the fraud and abuse that Trump is claiming, but for their own political fortunes, they keep stoking the fire because they're raising money off of it like crazy. They're list building like crazy, and they're all jockeying for position to get that Trump audience. We're in really very dangerous times. Do I see violence in the coming days? I do. Because you have someone in the White House who is not going to make things better. That has never been his intent. His intent has always been to destroy things, to tear things up. And he's done that successfully. Because look at where we are. You can't get people, at least I've struggled having conversations with people who disagree with me without it devolving into talking points and platitudes. Will Joe Biden help move us forward? And those, I don't know. But I know what Joe Biden should be doing. The first 100 days, all about the pandemic, all about making people's lives better, pushing policy that are going to help in that vein, getting money into people's pockets so that they don't lose their homes, that they don't lose their jobs, and that they don't end up broke. It seems that simple to me. And then pushing the things that we need, an infrastructure bill so badly to create the jobs that we're going to need to restart our economy. But we're going to need Republicans. And sadly, I don't see any. And that's what scares me. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. 2013 saw the end of what may have been the longest hotel strike in history. On Father's Day 2003, 130 workers from the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago walked off the job. They were protesting a reduction in wages and the hotel's hiring of minimum wage subcontractors. For 10 years, the strikers, led by Unite Here, picketed the hotel. The hotel management remained unmoved. Unite Here quietly ended the strike, but that was not the longest strike in history. Not by a long shot. On this day in 1961, barbers' assistants in Copenhagen, Denmark ended their strike. They had first walked off the job in 1928. And the Guinness Book of World Records has declared the strike the longest in recorded history. Every strike or work stoppage has its own character. A strike may be as short as just a portion of a day, or a strike may last for weeks, months, or years. Sometimes union members call strikes to last a specific amount of time. usually a few days. Other times, union members vote for an open-ended strike, with the duration uncertain. The tactic of a strike is one of the most extreme measures a union can take. Usually, a strike means that all other efforts to gain a fair contract have been exhausted. Long strikes have become less common in recent years. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were only 15 major work stoppages in 2013. Of these, 2/3 lasted 3 days or less. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome.
We humans have got to get a whole lot smarter, says Elon Musk, the billionaire founder of Tesla Automobiles and CEO of SpaceX Rockets. Musk is not merely reacting to humanity's recent tendency to elect lunatics to lead our countries. Rather, he's trying to warn us about the rapid rise of a radical new technology, artificial intelligence. In common parlance, he's referring to robots, but these are not the clunky, somewhat cute machines performing rote tasks. AI essentially has evolved to become an electronic brain, a web of ever more complex supercomputers interacting as one cognitive unit that can program itself, make decisions, and act independently of the humans who are creating them. These thinking machines are rapidly increasing in number and geometrically advancing their IQ, prompting Musk and others to view AI technologies in apocalyptic terms. As algorithms and systems inevitably grow more sophisticated, he says, digital intelligence will exceed biological intelligence by a substantial margin. In graphic terms, Musk warns that profiteering humans are, quote, summoning the devil by creating a new superior species of beings that will end up dominating humanity, becoming, quote, an immortal dictator from which we would never escape. What's weird is not his dystopian prognosis. Other experts confirm that runaway bot intelligence is a real threat, but his solution. The way for us human beings to compete with AI, says Musk, is to merge with it. Not a corporate transaction, but a literal merger. Surgically implant AI devices in human brains with, quote, a bunch of tiny wires that would fuse people with superintelligence. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's good to have technological geniuses alert us to looming dangers, but maybe the larger community of humanists ought to lead the search for answers.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So in just 2 days, we're going to certify this whole mess of the perfect phone call. Because what's weird to me, again, the perfect phone call is Trump still believes that there's no way he won and that he's going to snatch, victory out of the jaws of defeat. Because he said in the call that there are other states, there are a number of other states who are going to flip as well. He still thinks Georgia is going to flip. He thinks Pennsylvania is going to flip. Reality is, it's over. There's no flipping. But still believes it. And the question is how do we move forward as a country? And here to share some thoughts on, the big phone call and some of the craziness that we're going to possibly see in the next couple of days. I've asked our good friend David Pepper to come back and talk with us. David's the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, good to be with you. Thank you.
So I'm guessing, Ohio not going to be flipping. What a weird. Did you listen to the phone call?
I did. Partly because we had set this up. I actually took my lunch break today and listened to the whole thing, and it is so bizarre on so many levels. But like you said, one of the tells here is that, of course, he's only going after the states that he lost, so he's not looking into what happened in Ohio or other states that he won. It really, the whole call, though, is just unreal. And it really reminds you, when I listen to it, of Ukraine. But the big threat, and you saw what Kelly Loeffler did a couple hours ago, his big threat was, if you don't do this by Tuesday, your voters are not going to show up in the Senate race. And my guess is he's been running around with the U.S. senators, probably Mitch McConnell, and telling them the same thing. I mean, that was sort of the equivalent of the aid he was holding up in Ukraine. In this case, it was, I'm going to keep my voters from showing up. And I'm not surprised that Kelly Loeffler tonight said she also was going to object, because that's kind of been his sort of the deal he's been holding out there for.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have always known that politics is, a blood sport. I've always known that it's down and dirty, and that it can be divisive. But I never thought I would see the moment that we're in this moment, where I expect there to be violence in our streets. Once this is certified, once Wednesday comes and goes, I expect there to be violence.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary that this what they're building for Wednesday is that. I mean, it sounds crazy to say it too, but I don't think Trump. I think Trump wants to see. He said it at rallies. I think he wants to see trouble. I think he wants to cause trouble. I think he feels that that's part of his sort of thing. But no, it's scary. I mean, and I'm glad the D.C. mayor said what she said, because I also think they want to bait people into making it seem, chaotic and violent. And the best thing would be to whoever shows up, let them show up, let them do their thing, and everyone be safe. But no, it's scary. And I'm in Ohio. We are one of the places that, although it's a little bit below the radar, we've had a lot of almost every major incident of sort of white supremacy terrorist violence, whether it be Charlottesville or that plot in Michigan. There's been an Ohio tie there. People from Ohio involved, people planning in Ohio. So it's something that should worry us, not just in D.C., but all over the country, that we have this, new sort of extra sort of fired up group of people that clearly are listening to a president who wants them to do harm to other people.
Yeah, but the sad thing is, David, and where I'll push back is it's not new. I mean, this undercurrent has been there. Go back to the McVeigh days. We've had this right-wing militia mentality among us for a very long time. It's now this moment that they feel emboldened because there's a guy who's speaking their language sitting in our Oval Office.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with you. It's not new, but this goes way back, centuries. If the question is, do certain leaders call upon the worst of us to act on the worst instincts, or does it kind of just be under the surface? And I'm afraid right now we're seeing what happens, and we've seen it over the centuries, when a leader says it's okay to be this way. And by the way, one of my worries is that how many current Republican U.S. senators are saying don't be violent? How many of them call out these groups? Almost none of them do.
Nope.
Because I think in this environment, they actually think it runs against their political interests to criticize or to try and tamp down, because this has become an important part of the Trump base.
No, it's not the Trump base, but I would argue the entire Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that happened on Election Day, and this is true in Ohio, I don't think Republicans expected the turnout they got on their side. Trump did save a lot of state legislators and Congress people who probably thought they were going to lose. His turnout, which they still don't quite understand, actually won a lot of races. Not his, but others. So when you're sitting around in office, and you are in office because of a phenomenon you don't understand that you know is about Donald Trump, you're scared to death of saying something or doing something that basically would minimize the reason that you surprisingly won. And I think that's true of senators, Congress people, and state representatives. I mean, they were unexpected. There was an unexpected turnout in rural parts of Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and other states that the establishment Republicans still don't understand. They know it's because of Trump, and so they're all scared to death of it. And they, without him, they don't really have right now a turnout mechanism. And so I think that's made them especially, problematic. And my worry is 22 and beyond, it's going to be the same stuff we've been dealing with now for the last 4 years.
No, and this is why I wanted to talk to you, because look, in a couple of days, we're 16 days away from the 20th. Joe Biden is going to put his hand on the Bible, and he's going to take the reins. and he's got a mess and a half to clean up. We're clearly not vaccinating enough people fast enough. Our economy's in major trouble. We've got major debt problems and deficit problems that have been left to us by Trump and the Republicans. Because the first thing McConnell's now going to scream is, well, we don't have any money. We need austerity. We need austerity. So what do you see as Biden's first couple of moves? Obviously, the vaccine, getting that out and dealing with the pandemic is first and foremost. But how do you see him being able to maneuver, especially if you don't get 2 seats in Georgia tomorrow?
Yeah, and obviously, I really hope that we do, and I think that will make a huge difference. I think he's got to start with the vaccine. I mean, what's happening right now, and to listen, one of the other reactions listening to that tape is, my God, Donald Trump is in the weeds in Georgia, naming individual activists he doesn't like, citing all these numbers when he should be worried about the fact that the vaccine is not out as it should be, as this new sort of permutation of the virus should worry everybody. First and foremost, Joe Biden needs to sort of fill the gap right away. Do that, save lives quickly. Get that tied into the economic rebound. I think that's job one. There are a lot of things he promised. There are a lot of things he has to do. The one thing I'd say that is important and that does get lost, and also is a political problem, is I think we do have to get to issues of smaller towns across our country that are as much a victim of the Republican agenda as larger cities. And this is, you go back to why was Wisconsin and Michigan, why were they closer than we thought? Why was Ohio not in reach versus just a few years ago? And part of it is Trump turnout, and part of it is, mid-sized and smaller towns in this country are dying on a vine. And one thing I think Joe Biden can uniquely do beyond the immediate crisis he's got to solve is the guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania, I think needs to speak to those communities and say, listen, we know you voted for Trump, but we also know that none of the Republican agenda is helping you. In fact, it makes things worse. And I'm here, just like Obama saved the auto industry. That's how Obama won Ohio the second time. People knew he'd save the auto industry. I think Biden, one of the many things he has to do is really take on the struggle of these small towns, which I'm in them all the time in Ohio. It's deplorable what the Republican agenda has done in these places. They voted for these folks, and then they get literally everything taken from them. And I think trying to say, listen, our agenda helps our bigger cities, but also helps your small towns. If we're going to have a better 22 and 24 and not risk losing the House or the Senate, if we manage to pick it up, I think some of it's going to come from reaching out to these communities where the numbers are just too much against us, and they place our wins at risk.
No, it's an excellent point because, I've had a lot of conversations with folks who live in rural areas, and, they're of the mindset, the Ronald Reagan, I'm here for the government and I'm here to help, the worst things you can ever hear. And yet they benefit from so many programs that they don't even acknowledge. It is about making people's lives better, though. And I think, we've been led into this rural urban divide, in kind of a disingenuous way by the Republicans, because
absolutely
their policy has been harmful, as you pointed out, to everyone. And sadly, I don't think Democrats have helped themselves either by some of the the jokes and some of the narrative that you find about people living in rural areas, either of being uneducated and that such.
No, I agree. I mean, if you don't have a positive agenda for these areas, if you don't explicitly say, listen, when we talk infrastructure, we're talking to you as well. We're not just talking about the biggest bridge in Ohio. We're talking about the small bridge, the road that hasn't been paved in 5 years. When we talk green jobs, we're talking about something having to do with making solar parks in that factory that was in your town for years that shut down. I mean, I think we need to be explicit about it, but it's the same agenda. And the Republican agenda, I mean, these communities are up to their ears in the opioid crisis. They're as reliant on Medicaid as any large city, and so when Republicans attack the ACA, they're gutting these towns' health care on and on. The young people are leaving and not coming back, And we don't explicitly say to them, we hear it, we're going to do something about it. And by the way, the agenda you hear us talking about is exactly what you need. And again, I think it's about, and here's the difference between now and 6 months ago. The good news, we have the White House. So we can actually do something. It's not just a question of political spin and focus groups. It's actually doing enough so that in a couple years, the Democratic candidate for Congress in some of these areas can say, hey, you see that new town square? You see that new small bridge that you've always wanted to fix? Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Democrats did that. That's what we're doing. Give people something concrete, message it relentlessly. But at least now we're going to have at least the White House and the House to start doing this, as opposed to sort of being on the outside looking in, trying to sort of fight back against messages about socialism and other things. So there is an opportunity, and I sent a memo to the Biden Transition Committee a couple weeks after the election saying, take your shot. Now that you have the White House, have Joe Biden from Grant, Pennsylvania, talk about these issues. We're doing great in the suburbs, and we're obviously doing well in our big cities, but losses that are out of control in rural parts of a lot of our states are making things too dicey in some states and out of reach in other states.
Right, but doesn't that come back to also? I mean, one of the big issues when the rural-urban divide comes down to guns. Most of the people that I know are big Trump supporters are big gun nuts. They believe that Democrats are going to come and knock on their door, kick in their doors, and steal their guns. And as I've said, I've yet to see the policy that says that's going to happen. I've yet to see anyone propose legislation that says that's going to happen. But they're trained like Pavlovian dogs to say, Democrats, guns. They're coming for your guns.
Right.
Isn't that part of what needs to be addressed as well?
Yeah, it's part of it. But I'll point to a couple people. Sherrod Brown is progressive on gun issues. I mean, Obama got 40% in these areas. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about getting a majority. We're talking about not getting in the mid-20s. You get to 40% in rural Ohio, like Obama did, you're going to win Ohio, just like Sherrod Brown did. And it wasn't like they were giving away their principles on guns, but those voters, the first thing they know about Sherrod Brown in Ohio is not about his position on all sorts of issues. It's that guy's fighting for my economic interests. He's fighting for my pension. He gets what my small town's dealing with. If you ever watch Sherrod on the national news show, he doesn't just mention Cincinnati and Cleveland, and I'm proudly from Cincinnati. He mentions Mansfield and Marietta. He's always talking about these communities. And so you need to have a commonality around economic well-being. And then some of those people may say, well, I'm glad he's for me, but I don't agree on guns. But a lot of others will say, which I hear all the time, well, I don't really agree with Sherrod on that, but he's fighting for me, so I'm going to vote for him. But unless you really are leading with that commonality, then all these other issues, end up being what cost you the election. So it starts with you're fighting for the average Ohioan. You're fighting for the hardworking Ohioan. If they see that, then even if they don't agree on everything else, again, you're not going to win, even 50%. Just don't lose 75-25, because that's how. And by the way, what's sobering about the last election, although we're thrilled we won, is Trump did better in rural Wisconsin, rural Michigan, rural Ohio, and rural Pennsylvania than he did in 2016. And I think it speaks to this void that we're not getting these places and talking about sort of the labor, hard worker, manufacturing type issues that frankly these towns are still struggling with. I mean, these two places, and you know this, the 2008 recession, that's not what they're thinking about when they're thinking about economic problems. They're thinking about the late 70s, when the big employer left and was never replaced. And no one's ever really gone into these places and said, here's your role in the 21st century economy. The Republicans haven't done it, but nor have we, and I think this is our moment to do it. Again, you're going to still lose votes on guns, but at least you're giving people a vision of how they fit in, which no one's done for a long, long time, and clearly Trump took advantage of that.
No, ultimately it comes back to what I always say: you got to make people's lives better, or at least
Absolutely.
make them believe that you're working to make them better. And I think that was the mastery of what Trump brought to the table. He was the blind squirrel that found the net of caring about these rural communities and the jobs that they've lost. Growing up in Cleveland, I watched deindustrialization happen. I watched, people lose jobs, and not just the jobs that that they had, but really good family-sustaining wage jobs that decimated the family once it was gone and sent people into all kinds of problems, drug and alcohol abuse, divorce, all that stuff, of which Trump claimed he was going to recreate. He was going to bring back those good union jobs without saying the union word, and people took to it. But what's curious to me is he didn't do that in the 4 years that he's been in office, and really didn't move towards it. And yet he still got more people to come out for him.
Yeah, he did, and I think he clearly has a touch with some of these voters, and I think that's why Republicans are so scared, because without him, I don't think they know what they're supposed to say, because they haven't seen turnouts in rural parts of our states like he generated. But I also think it speaks to our own, Democrats' failure to really connect and campaign. And by the way, COVID made this harder. I mean, Joe Biden, just to give Joe Biden credit, in 2012, Joe Biden got on a bus in northeast Ohio and rode it all the way down to southwest Ohio, going right through these places. And he'd get out, and he was clearly, excited to campaign there. I think it did hurt that he, and I respected his respect of healthcare, of people's health, but I think it hurt that you couldn't get out and campaign in those places. They tried with a few different tactics, but it wasn't the same. But I also think that the messaging and our need to just, be more, I think when Democrats say we're infrastructure and we're for healthcare, that we think that they hear it as for them, but I don't think they do. I think they literally don't think that we're talking about them or to them, and I think it needs to be a lot more explicit. Who's going to have a very important role here is Tom Vilsack. The USDA does a lot of this type of work, and I think he did this before, but even in a bigger way now has got to be able to get out to these smaller towns and do broadband and figure out how to explain. No, when we say green jobs, that's something that could help your smaller town do better, and the like. So there's a lot to do there, and if we don't do it, then what happens? We're playing defense about things like defunding the police and socialism, and they don't know anything about what we actually want to do.
No, excellent point.
So I'm a bit, I'm trying to, I've been trying to communicate this, but it's not like this is I'm Sherlock Holmes here. I mean, they understand that this is a need, and if you don't do this well, 22 could be really risky. They're going to control districting a lot of states. If we don't figure out real quick how to narrow the gap in these places, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Republicans in 22 if we have the typical midterm pushback. So this is something that they've got to do fast, and in a lot of places.
Yeah,
and by the way, one other thing go ahead, I'm sorry.
Last question I got for you then, because 2022 is coming around real quick. Any chance you jump into a race somewhere in Ohio, maybe run for Senate or something?
I'm thinking, I literally stepped away from my chairmanship maybe 3 days ago. So it feels pretty quick to make decisions, and I think sometimes people make them too quick. But I'm looking at different options, including running. Before I was chair of the party, I was always a candidate and office holder. So I'm taking a look at several options, at looking also at administrative options, and I happen to be a writer as well. So we'll figure that out. I have 2 young kids, and so that's obviously a huge factor as well. So we'll see. But I will say this. Trying to hint at a run, but Rob Portman, he gets under the radar a little bit. He doesn't seem quite as bad as some of the other senators out there, but he has been part of the problem like anyone else. Will not ever stand up to Trump, and he's exactly the kind of political figure who's allowed through his silence and complicity Donald Trump to take over the party. And it's painful for Ohioans to watch this senator. Here we have this great senator and Sherrod Brown, and then you have this guy, Rob Portman, who just, is as spineless as it gets. So my hope is someone really good has to run against him, because he's the epitome of how Trump became who he is.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I was hoping Brown would be, maybe Biden's number 2. I'm hoping, come 24, he's going to be at the top of the hope. But ultimately the next 100 and some days, getting Biden inaugurated and moving forward. That's our goal. But David, I appreciate the time as always. I'd love to have you come back and share some more thoughts, because this clearly not something going to go away.
Great. Thanks for checking in. Talk soon.
Good stuff.
Well.
I appreciate it. David Pepper, former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. Oh, wow, is that a mess up? I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day workers at UAW Local 14 walked out on strike against the Toledo Chevrolet transmission plant. They joined the strike wave against General Motors. The national campaign started in November in Atlanta, Georgia, followed by auto strikes in Kansas City and Cleveland, then intensified in late December with the Great Flint Sit-Down Strike. Local 14 members had experienced General Motors' tricks firsthand during a 1935 strike. When GM couldn't stop unionization efforts at the Toledo plant, they began moving the machinery to non-union facilities in nearby Saginaw, Michigan, and Muncie, Indiana. GM's maneuvers drove Local 14 leaders to fight for a national agreement and help with organizing the national strike wave. Once it began, they were able to effectively shut down their plant. They routinely traveled to Flint during the sit-down to help with strike support and soup kitchen efforts. Many Local 14 members would also help beat back the police assault on sit-down strikers in the coming Battle of Running Bulls at Flint. And as Local 14 members walked out on strike at the Chevy plant that day, the UAW presented its 8 demands to GM. These included national collective bargaining rights, the end to the piecemeal pay system, the 30-hour work week, 6-hour day, time and a half for overtime, a living wage, reinstatement of discharged workers, the establishment of seniority rights, the recognition of the UAW as sole bargaining agent, and shared determination of production speed at all plants. GM finally started to budge a month later. This historic agreement would be signed in late March and set the standard in industries across the country as millions of workers sought to unionize. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, David's got an interesting point, and it's something that I've talked about, often on this program, of this rural-urban divide. Where as someone who lives in a rural area, you see this mindset that, well, we don't need no stinking government. And yet, the reality is our internet is terrible. We have, some of the worst internet possible because we've relied on private industry to bring it to us. There aren't enough people here to make it profitable, I've heard. We don't get the really good stuff. And, this is where a big infrastructure bill could make things better. We need, world-class internet like anyone else. Commerce happens in rural areas as well. And I know I have some of my lefty friends who say, well, why should we reward these communities who aren't with us? And elections are one thing. Governing is another. And I'm one of those people who believes that we need to govern in the best way possible for everybody. We need to make people's lives better. I think when the elections are over, it's then about doing the work. And I know that may be a touch naive to believe that, once you're elected, it's about doing the work. It's about getting something accomplished. The last 4 years have given us, virtually nothing. Virtually nothing in the way of public policy. We got a tax break for the very wealthy. We did that. Congratulations, pat on the back. They are doing wildly well. In fact, they're doing better than they've ever done thanks to the pandemic, and a massive tax break for them. But that age-old question, is your life better off? And we're in this weird world where, about half the country's doing okay. They're on the treadmill, they're making it, they're doing okay. And about half really isn't. Because we've chosen this section of winners over this section of people who are left behind. We have education problems that are going to only get worse in the new year because we don't have the funding for it. And get ready to hear that an awful lot. And it's going to fall onto rural communities as well. It's going to fall onto red states as well. One of the reasons Mitch McConnell didn't want to do a big stimulus bill was because he didn't want money going to the states. And when I mean the states, I mean Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Ohio. He didn't want money going to those states because those are states that, well, one, aren't right-to-work states and have public employees who still have health care and pensions. So the idea is if we can bankrupt those pensions, so much better for them. It comes down to playing the game. And this is where I struggle because I'm someone who believes that we need to have better government. We need to have things get done. Status quo benefits one group, the wildly wealthy. The status quo only benefits huge corporations. The status quo only allows the connected, the entrenched, the entitled to be the ones who make out. And while the rest of us, our kids go to schools that are struggling, our healthcare system is a mess, especially if you don't have insurance. And we're always looking for this Hail Mary. I saw this story just after the new year about Amazon and their H2Q project. And you may remember I talked about this for a while. There were, I think like 250 cities across the country who submitted really incredibly detailed proposals and these massive, welfare plans to Amazon to come, hey, no, come bring your headquarters to Indianapolis, bring your headquarters to Pittsburgh, bring your headquarters to Cleveland, and we'll give you the baby, the bathwater, the spigot, the tub, the room that it comes in. We'll give you everything. Just bring it. Just come. Knowing that they were never coming. They were going to end up in New York and D.C., which is where the population centers are. Now, fortunately for the people in D.C., they said, or in New York, they go, no, we're not giving you all this stuff. And they bailed. Virginia gave them a bunch, and they went there. A federal appeals judge in Indiana has ruled that the plan that the Indiana State Department of Economic Development, the Economic Development Corporation of Indiana, what they put forth to give Amazon, and we don't know what the offer was. We don't know what the information is. They didn't put it out. But this, and it wasn't a federal judge, it was a county superior court judge, has ruled that the public doesn't need to know what was in that proposal. It's that kind of stuff that's frightening to me. As a believer in government, open, transparent government, that stuff should have been a matter of public record. When you do these things in the dark of night, when you do these things that could cost us, billions of dollars, don't you think you want that out there? Now, his argument was, well, you know, it wasn't part of the final record. It wasn't the final proposal. It was, you know, all this other stuff. Reality is this Economic Development Corporation was going to give them massive amounts of funding from who knows where. And generally where it comes from is education, healthcare, the things we've been talking about, the things where rural America suffers. Interesting times. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Our climate crisis is not a partisan issue, and it is not a hoax.
Biden-Harris administration makes history in introducing their full climate team. Congressional COVID relief package includes climate and clean energy legislation. Plus, Trump administration ends the tyranny of efficient showerheads.
Oh, thank God. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So showerheads, you take a shower, the water doesn't come out. So what do? You just stand there longer, or you take a shower longer? Because my hair, I don't know about you, but it has to be perfect.
Have you tried turning the water on, sir? Just asking. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, there aren't all that many days left in the Trump administration, though I know it seems like forever. Nonetheless, in those days, he can still do a lot of damage.
Oh, indeed. The Trump administration is racing the red light in its final weeks, rushing to approve a final wave of large-scale mining and fossil fuel projects on public lands. Projects pushed by investors hoping to lock in big extraction projects even after President-elect Joe Biden takes office. The Trump Energy Department also rolled back water efficiency standards for major appliances and showerheads that Donald Trump complained weren't sufficient for his hairdo.
You know, I just have this idea in my head that this entire presidency has been about Donald Trump wanting to change the low-flow shower heads and toilets in his buildings.
Well, he has finally ended their reign of terror.
Success!
These rollbacks will force consumers to pay more to waste water and energy. Now, the Biden administration can undo some of these rollbacks, but it will take time. Georgia voters have a say, though, but only if they vote for both Democratic candidates to win the U.S. Senate runoff races on January 5th. If Democrats control both the Senate and the House, they can invoke the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to strike down such last-minute regulations.
Allows them to strike down everything within the last 6 months of a presidency, no?
Pretty much.
Wow.
The bipartisan COVID economic relief package passed by Congress on Monday reportedly includes significant clean energy and climate provisions, the first such legislation to pass Congress in nearly a decade. Included are provisions to phase down use of chemicals used in air conditioners and refrigerators called HFCs that are potent greenhouse gases, and includes measures to boost development and construction of clean energy projects. Meanwhile, over the weekend, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris introduced members of their climate and energy team, leading the administration's plans to address climate change. If confirmed by the Senate, the climate team will mobilize to implement Biden's proposal to achieve net zero emissions economy-wide by 2050 and a carbon-free electric grid by 2030.
Yeah, but what's he going to do about shower heads?
Folks, we're in a crisis. Just like we need to be a unified nation in response to COVID-19, we need a unified national response to climate change. We need to meet the moment with the urgency it demands, as we would during any national emergency.
Biden previously announced that former Secretary of State John Kerry will direct international climate policy. Former EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy will coordinate domestic climate policy.
Environmental protection is part of my moral fiber. It's what I live for.
Biden also broke new ground in two of the most crucial cabinet positions. Both will put environmental justice front and center. Biden tapped Michael Regan, North Carolina's state environmental chief, to rebuild the Environmental Protection Agency and will be the first African American to run the agency.
Together, this team will ensure that environmental justice and human impacts are top of mind as we tackle these tough issues. We need an all-hands-on-deck approach, from industry to individuals.
I do not envy that guy having to clean up at the EPA.
Representative Deb Haaland of New Mexico will lead the Interior Department, and if confirmed by the Senate, she would become the first ever Indigenous Cabinet Secretary.
As our country faces the impacts of climate change and environmental injustice, the Interior Department has a role to address these challenges. The President-elect's goals, driven by justice and empowering communities who have shouldered the burdens of environmental negligence. And we will ensure that the decisions at Interior will once again be driven by science.
Very cool that there will be a Native American heading up the Interior Department. Finally.
Oh, yes.
I don't envy her having to clean up that mess either. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. You can find and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I found it funny that the Q Congresswoman, the QAnon Congresswoman from Georgia, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, had her Trump One mask on Sunday when they went on the House floor to be sworn in. Again, you start off your career as a congresswoman wrong. Just I don't have anywhere to go with that other than it's bizarre, it's crazy, but it's the world that we now find ourselves in. Here to share some thoughts on the fun that's going to happen the next couple of days. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Let's start with, did you have a good break, good holiday, all of that?
Yes, it was pretty decent. Not bad at all. Quiet.
Rested, recharged, rejuvenated, all that?
Yeah, semi. I'm not going to lie to you. I babysat and I lifted two of the kids up and let them go up on the counter, which my son gave me heck for, and it did something to my lower back.
Uh-oh.
So I had a child injury. That's the worst it got.
Here,
right.
Take them back.
Right. There you go.
Well, I wish you the best. Let's get to the big news.
Sure.
We've got people sworn in. Nancy Pelosi going to be speaker for another 2 years. Thoughts on the shenanigans we've seen play out so far?
Well, they passed the rules package, which we did many times when I was there. They made a change to the rules package, which I kind of like, because it used to be when we were in the majority, the minority would make this motion to recommit the bill at the end, right before the vote, and then they would put in something basically that didn't have much to do with the bill, like change the dynamics of the arsenic levels in water, or whatever it was. I mean, I'm just remembering one there. And then once you didn't vote to recommit the bill, you were on record of not wanting to change the arsenic levels, right? So what they've done, which I don't think is bad for the process, they just said, you can move to recommit the bill, but you don't put these extra things in there. And so that's one of the changes, which is not going to... This is all inside baseball, but I thought it'd be kind of interesting to mention it.
Kind of limiting the ability to poison pill something.
Right. Well, that's a much better way than what I just said, right? Exactly. Not to poison pill something. Exactly.
I mean, this is something I've said for a very long time. We need to, let's get back to, figuring out how to get things done, accomplished, fixed, and not, just having these massive bills with all kinds of stuff in it that nobody reads and one person finds objection to.
Right. So they've done this. They had a much different swearing in than we used to have, or anybody's ever been used to. You know, you got one ticket for family or friends, and normally the place, of course, is packed pre-COVID. But bottom line is, it's going to be operational. The Senate convenes itself, and then, of course, there'll be the January 6th overture on the floor, which I went through myself in 2005 when Ohio was protested. This will be a whole different world this time, though, because, technically, Rick, they will be able to protest whatever state they want. Only Ohio was protested by the late Stephanie Tubbs Jones, but you could have, a protest of 7 states, and you get 2 hours to debate on that protest of the electors per protest.
So it could be a long
together
day.
and limit it. Yeah, if they get together to limit it, it'd be one thing. That's the House. The Senate's taking an entirely different twist. The Senate is going to, via Ted Cruz, if they even get that far, I'm saying if, because a lot of Republicans are not happy with what he's doing. He's going back to 1876 in the Hayes-Tilden race, and he is trying to create this commission, and then it would be emergency funded. Wouldn't that be hilarious? You ever think that Congress could actually do something in 10 days? I don't think so. This would be January 20th of 2022, but he's going to do that. That's going to fail. All of this is going to fail, and Biden will be president-elect with some Republican votes in the House and Senate when this is done.
Now, you listen to the phone call, and the states are flipping as we speak. I mean, the perfect phone call from Georgia. They won by hundreds of thousands of 500,000 votes in Georgia.
I watched today the representative. Well, first of all, there was a statement by Georgia's Secretary of State, Republican Brad Raffensperger, and then they had an amazing guy named Sterling. Did you happen to catch that? I don't know if you caught it. It's worth Googling. His name's Sterling. He unbelievably, succinctly, right down the line, disputed every single thing humanly possible in an extremely professional way. This guy should be running for office. He's amazing. And then he was commenting on Secretary of State, because he works for him as an election official, and they were asking him different questions. He handled all of them quite, appropriately. Of course, the national media was all there, but he just showed and disputed everything from the shrink-wrap ballots. What were these mysterious ballots in the warehouse? All the warehouses for all the counties. Well, it's because Georgia state law says you will have emergency 1,000. Potential ballots available for emergency purposes, overseas purposes, etc. So he just explained it all. I mean, this is done. The 6th, when it is I don't know if they're going to still try to raise money off of us. I'm sure you get those emails. I'm on that list.
All the time.
But it's done. You can buy a MAGA hat if you want, but it's not going to help anything.
No, this is what I've said from the beginning. I've said from the beginning, this isn't about, there's no chance of changing the election. It's about fundraising, list building, and jockeying for position on who's going to replace Trump.
Yes.
That's it.
And there's something interesting, though, that's happened. When you and I spoke on your show a few months ago, I was looking at potentially tight races, but 2 Republican pickups, and then at best 1-1. At best, if there was a Hail Mary, then the Democratic side would pick up both races. Well, there's a semi-Hail Mary going on, because I think that with tonight, the rally obviously is about Trump, and I'm starting to think, I don't know what you would think of this, starting to think that he maybe wants the Republicans to lose those 2 races. I'm thinking that.
No,
for his ego, that you can't do it unless he's going to be in the White House.
Exactly. I think he doesn't care about anybody but himself. And this phone call, again, proves that it's all about him. Because, he spent well over an hour on this call making all of these wild accusations that they never made in a court of law at a moment while we're struggling to get people vaccinated in the middle of the greatest pandemic of our lifetime.
Well, he did that. On top of it, he obviously was saying to the Secretary of State that he could be brought up on criminal charges. He was saying that. that the Secretary of State knew illegal things were going down, and he said something to the effect of, "You knew it. You would be potentially responsible for a criminal cover-up, et cetera." And he's still running the Justice Department, so let's face it, that's a threat, of type. But everything he threw out there, the Secretary of State, give him credit. He just, very methodically and very self-controlled disputed it. As far as who taped it, I thought the answer Sterling gave today was very good. It's what I thought. If I were the Secretary of State getting on the phone with the President of the United States, with President Trump, I should say, I would tape it too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I would tape it to protect myself, because Trump could have came off and said that he said all kinds of things. So I think he did that. But the phone call is obviously disturbing for, we don't have enough time on your show tonight. It's disturbing for a wide variety of reasons. But on top of it, too, let's say that, let's say he got him to change 11,700 and some votes. What did that do? I mean, Biden is still President of the United States.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you got to know that these conversations are probably going on in all of the other states as well.
Well,
he's strong-arming the people that he can. Again, this is another, great, perfect mob call. We're going to threaten you. We're going to threaten your family. Because, there was part of that. You be a respected man. You don't want to be the guy who everyone blames for this. There was a bunch of that. And it was, I mean, I listened to it in this kind of an awe of, this is the guy who is the most powerful person in the world, exerting this kind of mob-style pressure on this poor little Secretary of State, who is not, in my view, a great hero. He's done some pretty shady stuff to keep people from voting. There's a whole list of that. But in this moment, he stood his ground and he stood up and spoke back, and I give him credit for that.
Right, and then it was a series of things. President said, "I don't do rallies for other people; I do them for me." He said that tonight, and then on the governor, Kemp, "I'll be here in about a year and a half campaigning against your governor," and he went on to say, basically, they're going to have to take the White House. They're going to have to take it. And you look at that. In fact, his quote was, "And they're not taking this White House. We're going to fight them." Yeah. And you look at that and the verbiage. But I thought, I don't know, as a citizen and, knowing our country, which is a great country and has such potential, it has flaws, it has such potential, but to listen to that phone call in the waning days it's sad. It's not just scary, Rick. It's sad.
Yeah. Now there are those of us, I'm one of these people who I go back to, in my view, a lot of this started during the Reagan era and moved its way through the Gingrich era. Of this hatred of government and this massive division. I look at someone like Gingrich who, he's on the bandwagon. Do you place any blame there of, moving us in this ripping us apart? Do you put any of that blame in those directions, or is this all on the Trump?
Well, it's harder for me to place blame, and I'll tell you why. When I look back at, and I've said this many times, when I look back now at the Gingrich era, which I was part of, I was part of the freshman class, and we, changed the Congress over, and I look at that, and I look at Clinton and Gingrich, and when I compare it might have had the seeds, well, it did have the seeds at the beginning of mistrust of the government, yes, but when I look at how they actually ended up working on some things, it was like a honeymoon compared to today's cycle. I think that Trump has put this on steroids. It's on steroids. So if you look at what he's doing now and you look back at Clinton and Gingrich, they actually did some things like permanent trade, which I couldn't stand, but they actually, in one way, were more cooperative with each other than even a tiny thread of things today.
No, you're right. I mean, the fact that we couldn't get a stimulus bill passed all these months, the fact that we can't get money into states to get the vaccines in people's arms, just incredible.
That's tragic. That's tragic.
Just tragic. Last question I've got for you: Ohio just passed stand your ground laws, I guess today. Just signed, right?
Yes.
You going out to buy the gun now? Because look, I guess everyone in Ohio is going to need to be armed, right?
Well, remember, I can't even hunt. Remember, for the rest of my life. Because I'm deemed dangerous, I can't hunt. I can't have a gun because of the felonies. Now, I will admit to you, if you have a fundraiser, Rick, I could be dangerous. That I'll admit to you, But yeah, if you throw a fundraiser, you got to watch me. But
there you go.
So I'm not part of that.
Good idea, bad idea on the stand your ground?
I haven't actually looked at the bill. That's one thing I did not see today. So I haven't. I comment in another show, but I actually have not had a chance with everything else going on to look at the bill.
Yeah, I mean, most of the ones that I've seen that are scary to me. It's turned us into this kind of trouble-looking society. I look at the George Zimmerman case, and this kind of stuff frightens me.
Well, I knew on the bill that DeWine, our governor, had said at one point in time he was threatening to veto the measure. So I don't know what they did at the end. I actually was asked about it about an hour ago by a friend of mine, and I said I don't. Sometimes they're okay, but I don't know what is in that bill. Of course, the problem, I know what they were doing in that bill. They were going to remove, quote, the duty to retreat requirement before a gun owner could use lethal force, and that's a problem, I think. And
that's a huge problem.
Originally, DeWine had a problem with it, but I guess he didn't. He signed it.
No, it's a huge problem. I mean, it's one of those things where, I get into a fight with you, you kick my behind, and I shoot you because I got to stand my ground.
Right.
And that seems to be okay. It's insane.
Right. Yeah. So I think removing the duty to retreat is obviously going to be extremely controversial provision that is going to be hard to argue out, frankly, in court. Just with the scenario you said, well, he kicked me, I shot him.
Yep.
I didn't have to retreat.
Crazy times we live in, and I fear violence in the streets over the next couple of days. Going to be interesting. But Bob, as always, I appreciate the time and the thoughts.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you so much, my good friend.
Thank you.
No, I mean, this whole stand your ground thing is just nuts to me. I'll be honest. It's one of those crazy bits of law that they've put into place that I think goes completely against common sense. I understand if you're in your home, you protect your home. But this is the weird part of it. The Zimmerman case. He went, screwed with this kid. They started a fight with this kid. This kid, started to kick his behind and he shot him. Because, he shouldn't have been, causing this kind of trouble. You get these people who think in this way. And the worst part of it is, and it's going to make us a much worse society. Because, there's been a couple of videos out there that I've seen where, someone, they feared for their lives because they were causing some trouble. They were doing something that someone responded to, and they turned and they shot him because, hey, I was in fear of my life because he pushed me. And I think it was the story of, a guy had come up and yelled at some woman about, parking in a handicap spot. And her husband came out of the store and said, hey, what are you yelling at my wife for? And kind of pushed him out of the way. And the guy shot him. And so what you go is, if you're the guy who comes out of the store and they're harming your wife, you go over, you get involved in it. Now you have to shoot that guy. You have to escalate it to a point of extreme danger to protect yourself. Nothing good in this. Nothing good. But I know the Republicans in the NRA want it because it sells more guns and makes us think that we can all be Wyatt Earp. Scary, scary times. And finally, good news out of the Alphabet workers. Google changed its name. It's the parent company is Alphabet. About some 200 employees of Google's parent company announced today that they have signed union cards to organize with the Communication Workers of America. They have formed the Alphabet Workers Union. I've reached out to them. I'm going to try and get them on the program to talk about their organizing campaign. Why in the most prosperous company in the history of civilization have they decided that the union is where they want to go? I think it's an important story and something I think that'll be good to talk about. Anyway, good to be back. Long layoffs are always tough to come back from. Got a big week ahead of us with the election in Georgia tomorrow. If you're in Georgia, by all means, make sure that your vote gets counted. and also Wednesday when the real fun, the real insanity, the real craziness happens in our Congress. And it then becomes official. Joe Biden will be our next president. That simple. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
One, two, three, four, five, six. Hello? 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 Why? Incoming call volume. Are you there? Hello? Hello? Hello?